All right. Well, great. I think we're going to get started. I know Allison has a few words to say.
Yep. So great. Welcome, everyone. Good evening. My name is Allison Potts. I am the president of Nantucket Preservation Trust, and I'm really pleased to welcome you to the 16th annual August Fête. I am very sad that we are all on Zoom yet once again. We're looking forward to being back in person, and fingers crossed that that will be next year. And as you guys all know, the Fête is our most major fundraiser, so we really appreciate the support and your generosity. This year's Fête explored hidden ponds and secret lanes and nestled little coves right downtown in our old historic district, and we were really excited that so many people got to join, and thank you for those who texted me today and told me that you loved it. I know that Mary loved leading them all. They explored the downtown on Lily Street and Gull Island Lane and Westchester Street and some of Nantucket's historic neighborhoods. They really are best explored on foot, and I really encourage you all to go. And NPT certainly is pleased to offer walking tour options throughout the summer, so please check our website for options there. This year's Fête is a little bit different than last year's in the past, but the one thing really remains the same, and Mary always reminds me of this, that whether or not you're watching one of our video house tours or taking a guided walking tour or reading ramblings or any other of the NPT publications, it's really about a story about Nantucket's rich history. And our historic preservation is not just about buildings, it's about people and our people who shaped Nantucket's island's history. I'd like to take a minute to thank those responsible for tonight's event. The Fête requires certainly a lot of planning, which could not be accomplished without our dedicated NPT team, Michelle Whelan, Rita Carr, Julie Keever, and Mary Bergman. And this year we have an intern, Claire Utley, and thank all of them for their hardworking jobs on this event, but also our chairs and our volunteers, Barbara Halstead and John King, and Gussie Bogren, who acted as the chair for our Sense of Place auction. We're so grateful to the folks who opened up their homes for video tours, and I hope you have had a chance to take a look at them over the last week, and if you haven't, I highly encourage that you do so. Abby Camp, the Forsyth family, the Lowy family, and Sarah Noelle McLane were all quite generous to open up their houses, their times, their stories. We want to thank you very, very much. And thanks to our live panel here tonight, the homeowners, and the folks that are affiliated with these properties. I just listed, as well as Nathaniel Allen, Colin Evans, and Fran Karttunen. I hope I pronounced that right. I'd be remiss if I didn't say our financial support is really critical to our mission. And this year's event, without the support of our underwriters, Silvercrest Asset Management, Susan Zises Green, Interior Design, Pure Insurance, and Nantucket Insurance, we thank you very, very much. We couldn't do it without you. So we're really fortunate to have a very large group of loyal business sponsors and auction donors and leadership sponsors and volunteers. And we are really deeply grateful for the support of everyone else who has made this possible. Before I wrap up, I want to remind you about our Sense of Place exhibition and auction. If you haven't gone out there, please go and tell 1,000 of your closest friends to please look and bid. It is really a carefully curated collection of works, and it's really unique. And some of the items I don't think you'll find anywhere else. And you certainly can view them live if you'd like at our home on 11 Center Street, daily 10 to 2. The auction will be up and running until Monday, August 16th, and there are a lot of special items, but I wanted to single out one, the Nantucket Dream Dollhouse. It's incredible. If you haven't seen it, you must go see it. It's more than a dollhouse. It's a piece of art. It's a work of art. And there are so many special items in there. And I wish I could single out them all, but it really is an incredible detailed work that was created by Gussie Bogrant, Beth Davies, Barbara Halstead, and Michael Sweeney over the last 2 years. And it has such detail as a house marker, individual Nantucket artists' paintings in every single room. a real looking cedar wood roof. It is just spectacular. So please, if you haven't seen it, go look at it in person. And you can find it on our website at nantucketpreservation.org. And like I said before, bidding will close August 16th at 8 p.m. So feel free to send the auction link to 1,000 of your closest friends. And please bid on as many items as you can. There's also an opportunity to raise your paddle for our historic house markers, or to donate to one of our programs. It's another great way to support NPT. So thank you again for all of your support and joining this evening. I'm going to turn it over to Mary Bergman, our Executive Director, and I really look forward to enjoying this evening. Cheers.
Thanks, Allison. Thanks, everybody's on the call. So we've gotten to spend a lot of time down on Nantucket's North Shore this past week, and we're so appreciative of all of the homeowners on the call today, who many of whom let us stand in front of their homes and talk about their homes 3 times a day, which was a fun experience. And I also want to thank so much Rita Carr, our Director of Media and Communications, who really has spent a lot of time and energy making those house tour videos in the last couple of weeks and months. So as we're sitting here together and not together, I wanted to just start by asking the homeowners, what drew you to this part of the island, to the Gull Island, Lily Pond area? What was it that made you, when you came across this house, said, this is where I want to be?
It was me. We didn't know we wanted to buy a house, but we had a dog at the time. We used to rent everywhere. And our friend, Rich Leone, who was a longtime islander and a real estate agent at the time, used to send postcards. It wasn't like online that, you send pictures. And anyway, we came up and we saw the house, and I thought, well, this is just perfect. And, it was, we looked everywhere. Anyway, the owner was an interesting woman with a long ponytail. She lived in New Mexico at the time. Anyway, whatever the asking price was, that was the price. So I said, please, let's do it. And we did it. And then she had the house for 6 months after we closed. So anyway, here we were, 1990 or 1989. And I just loved everything about it. So close to town, feels like the country, beautiful trees and lawn and
the lily pond.
And Lily Street is wonderful, and the park is just great. And what's not to love?
Absolutely. I know, Abby, your answer will be a little different than everyone else's.
Yeah, right. Can you hear me? I muted myself. I have some dogs in the background. Yeah, right. But I did have to make a decision. I did have a house in Sconset, and when my mother died in 2005, I actually did put it on the market for 1 week, and then I walked by and saw the renters having so much fun in it. I was like, oh my God, I am not giving up this house. They had the lights on and they were reading in the sunroom, and I was like, they can't do that. That's my house. That's my heritage. So I had to choose between Sconset and town, and I chose the Coffin family to continue, being, what do they call that? Guardianship.
Mm-hmm.
Trustee.
Yeah, right. So that was, I had to make that choice.
I think for us, it was much quieter on this side of town, and I think Frances touches on that in her book as well. I don't know if it's because the sun sets on the west or what it is, but this side of town just seems less traffic, less busy, more natural than when we were starting to look around. We didn't know where we wanted to live, so we looked literally all over the island. It took months, but then we started zeroing in on town, because I think in the back of our mind we knew we would have children, and I think being in town is such a great convenience to, you know, even to this day, the kids love to hang out in town, so it's better that they walk than ride their bikes, or worse yet, have us have to drop them off and pick them up. So I think the proximity, the natural beauty, you know, I just think especially on, you know, Lily Street has this, Westchester has this, I think North Liberty, Gull Island for sure. When you have that access to Lily Pond, it just makes it a really nice spot. Anything to add?
Yeah, great. Excellent. Let's see. You know, I think about this a lot when I'm doing research. That you start to see the same names over and over again. And I feel like there's so many questions that I have for the people that were on this island 200 years ago. And I wonder if anybody here on this panel has a question that they would love to ask the person that built their home, or the person who lived in their home, or just a friend, somebody that you may have come across in your research that you wish you could go back and ask them something.
It's a great question.
Or Nathaniel, do you ever come across something in your work and you wish you could go back and say, why did you do this? Or could you teach me how to do this? I know Colin and I have talked about tools sometimes, and you know, if you could go back and show people what you were working with today.
Yeah, I experience things like that quite often. A few of them are a little bit too esoteric to really get into at this particular moment, but when I'm really getting into the bones of a structure, I have a rather intimate relationship with the builder of these dwellings and other buildings, and would love to be able to ask them questions.
Mhm.
That's
One
funny with our
couldn't
house. Go ahead, Nathaniel.
I was going to chime in along with Nathaniel, saying previous repairs and changes over the building's history, and just you know, we can kind of guess why things were done that way or whatnot. But it'd be great to see why some repairs were done certain ways, or what approaches they thought made sense at the time, which might not now. But yeah, I'd love to be able to ask some questions.
I guess
think
I
the
would,
big-
I would like to go back in time and ask Love Paddock, did you really let out the lily pond?
Mhm.
What?
That's a great question.
Really let out the pond, the person who allegedly.
We've been wondering about that all week. Could that really have been what happened?
I had a big question. It was you know, our lot is like this and our house is cockeyed on the lot. So my question is like, why is our house cockeyed on the lot? You know, there's stories that go with that, but I'm not really sure, you know, why that happened. You know, I heard that was because the oxen got stuck in the mud.
Oh.
And they left it where it was, but it's an interesting positioning. So
I like that story.
Yeah. Abby, you've been living in a house that's been in your family since 1866. Do you feel like you've come to know those members of your family being in that structure?
Yes, it's and some of them quite haunting. I bet when we were working on the house, one of the carpenters was staying in one of the back rooms, and he had somehow got Lyme disease pretty badly. He actually had the palsy thing on his face. So he was in the back room, and he swears that he saw a ghost and that he had whispering in his ears. But that, I mean, he could have also been delirious from the fever. But so I'm not sure. I mean, every time, but I have such a good sense of this family that lived in the house, you know, 100 years ago or so. They were it was such a different time. I mean, they really did memorize poetry, and they were they all were carpenters. They were all fishermen. They were all hunters. and they lived off the land. And the windows, the carpenter who was talking about, you know, how they made the house. When we renovated the house, you can take out the window absolutely completely. You can take out the sides of the window. You can take out the 2 sashes and put them to the side and adjust them if they're rattling, and then put them back in. And, you know, when I'm on the HDC and everybody wants to replace the old windows, and it's such a shame because it's really craftsmanship, and it's just amazing how these houses are built. You know, and some of them are pretty crappy too. That's true. Like I always felt that what it would be the south side of the house was added on. And it doesn't really match completely the main mass from the 1799. But I always got the feeling that, you know, a house burned down and that what was left, but they were able to, you know, sort of attach it back so that it looks like it always was there. So I mean, they all had this sort of craftsmanship that we don't have really today. But I kind of rambled there. I don't know what was the question.
I think you did great. You did great. And I have a question for Mark and Suzanne. Suzanne, I know that you're an interior designer. And when I've come to really understand in the work that I see here, I think that there are a lot of preservation decisions that are made by interior design. And when we go into your house, it's very open, even though the rooms are. And I wondered what suggestions might you have for people to be able to maintain that original floor plan, but still have sort of an open, modern feel? Yeah, there you go.
Well, I think our architect was so helpful as far as bridging the old to the new, and connected the old to the new through this kitchen. And we actually recycled a lot of the elements. When we dormered the front of the 1740 structure, we were able to take out beams from the ceiling and then brought them through the back half of the new addition on the home. And I think those old elements and beams throughout the back structure link the house really nicely. And then I think just color for me, the light, bright neutrals and whites kind of freshen it and bring it into the current.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Sarah, I think when people look at the videos of 6 Gull Island Lane, and I know a number of MPT members went into that house a number of years ago before it got into your very capable hands. I think people are surprised to find how much of the interior is preserved. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the work that you're doing, like with the hand sanding that you've been doing and the work? It's rare too to find, people are like, people that we've talked on the street, people are like, amazed that you are doing the work too. And I think that is pretty rare. You're really hands-on. And what, have you ever done anything like this before?
I have, not to this extent. So when I looked at the house, I had been told originally that it was going to be preserved by somebody else. And then it was back on the market. And I basically looked at it and said, this can't happen. Like somebody can't, like someone has to take this house and save it. And so that's sort of what drove the process for me. So back to the Lily Pond area, I picked the house, not the area. I love the area now that I'm there, but it had nothing to do with the area. I basically found the house that needed the most work and just picked that one. And I'm sure people think that I'm absolutely insane. And I go there every day with a smile on my face, and I strip paint, and every day I'm stripping paint. And most people, again, would think that that's not the smartest thing to do. But what they also don't understand is that underneath the 20 layers of lead paint and latex paint and everything else that's been happened is the original detail of the original trim moldings that were put in when the house was built in, call it 1799. And when I strip back all of the layers of paint that have failed, so it's not like it's paint that I could have saved. It had failed many, many years ago. It was not, I couldn't save it. The molding profiles are so incredibly amazing. And they're, potentially 16 different, profiles for something that was so rounded over because it had so many layers of paint. So when I'm uncovering those things, it's like an archaeologist, and I get really excited about that. And the wood is completely smooth, and so there's very little like hand sanding that needs to happen after all that paint comes off, because the old wood is first growth, so it's very tight grain and it's beautiful. And so, I'm getting it back to where it was, and then it will all be repainted again because, the wood would have been painted originally, not left unfinished. And, in some cases, I've got walls that are planked walls that have hand planing marks on them. And, it's just, to me, to see that and to feel that is amazing. So, I love doing it. And fortunately for me, I have the time to do it right now. I enjoy it. If someone were to look at all of the crazy hours that I spend and look at it as like being an artist and uncovering something, would make a lot more sense versus, just some crazy person who's stripping a lot of paint in a house. But when it's done, you will look at it and go, now I understand why she did that.
Yeah. So Sarah, how did you assemble your team?
I was really fortunate in that I was put in touch with Penn Austin very early on in the project, long before I bought the property. And so she was sort of, her name came up a number of times as the person to talk to on island. I met with her. We were crawling underneath the house in a cold January, looking at the sills and trying to figure out how extensive the repairs were. She had also been part of the people that had come through when the University of Florida had done their original scans. And so she was familiar with the property. She was very excited to be able to get back in there. And when I first looked at it, the house was still on the market and I did not have control of the house. So we couldn't, sort of open up walls. We couldn't really touch anything to sort of really understand what was going on, but we had a pretty good idea. And I kind of looked at it as, we're going to probably have to replace anything structural. It definitely needs a new roof. It needs, all mechanicals. It needs insulation. I mean, I kind of looked at it as worst case scenario. And it took me a while to get control of the property. And in that time, her time frame didn't work out. And unfortunately, she wasn't able to work on the project. What she did do was give me the names of her most trusted subcontractors. And so I reached out to them and assembled my team that way. And so I made sure that all of the people that were working on the property had worked together before, which in other projects that I've done, I've always felt is very important. And I just felt, when I spoke to them, I wanted to have people that sort of understood what I was trying to do with the property and had the same sort of idea of stewardship that I had. And it kind of worked out in terms of the people that were available at the time and who came on board, and I couldn't have been happier. So that's kind of how it ended up happening. It was sort of fortuitous that things worked out the way that they did. And the project has taken a lot longer than we thought, partly because of COVID, partly just because of circumstance. But everyone is still on board, which is really nice. So it's worked out well thus far. Yep.
Yeah. And what is, the folks, I would imagine Mark and Suzanne, you must have been thrilled when Sarah moved in next door.
I think they would love it if the lane were actually clear and done and the project is over right now, which we all would really like. But I think that from the standpoint of having the ability to have someone come in and not, gut the inside of the house and make it look like every single other house, I think that anyone who has any sort of affinity to preservation would understand and appreciate that, and appreciate that it does take longer than the normal building process on this island. And again, when it's done, it's going to look like it's been there for 250 years, but just really well maintained.
We appreciate Sarah so much. We obviously bought this house with eyes wide open and just love the lane and the old home. We fell in love with it. And to have Sarah next door, as you said, she is there, or she said she is there every day with a smile, and she's so passionate about the home. So it's our dream come true, however long it takes. And like the lane will be better in the end, and we're just thrilled.
Yeah. I wonder, Tom and Beth, did you uncover anything interesting when you were restoring the house?
Well, when we moved in, the seller sort of just walked away and left us with a house full of crappy old furniture and bookshelves, strange little bookshelves in the middle of the living room. And on one of those bookshelves, we found what probably is objects that are foreign to you, but we knew about, these ledgers. Everybody in the world before computers used ledgers. And there was a ledger from the guy who built the house. And every day of his life, he used it as a diary. And especially he marked down whether the Yankees had won or lost, what the price of eggs were, what the weather was like. And it was a remarkable history for probably 40 years of living here. And we're Yankee fans too. So we felt a camaraderie, a kindred spirit with Mr. Walsh. And then we were doing a extension on the side of the house, and our builder said, that Walsh's son lives out in Sherburne Commons. And we had no idea. And we called him up and said, we have your father's ledgers here. Would you like them? And he said, sure. And we went out to Sherburne and gave him. He was very grateful. And it gave us a strong connection to the history of the house.
Yeah, that's a great
story.
That's a great story.
Even though he's a Yankee fan.
We won't hold that against you all.
But when we moved in, the bathroom sinks were made out of linoleum, and it was very rustic, is what I have to say. And a lot of islanders who grew up here said, oh, we used to go to parties at that house, and we went through the ceiling one time. It was like because I think the woman who owned it, who was pretty interesting, she had 6 kids. And one time a few years ago, somebody was looking at the house, and I said, would you like to see it? And I said, we used to live here. So I said, come on in. And we have that closet that we used to call we call it a telephone booth, because it looks like it must have been a telephone room. Mm-hmm. And all these old toys and games, which were left when she moved, he recognized them. I said, please take what you like. You know what I mean? There's nothing better than nostalgia. And especially he had kids. So I feel very happy and honored that I can live in a house that has this kind of great history.
Yeah, those are great stories. Fran, you've spent a lot of, you've done a lot of things, and you've studied other places and worked other places and returned to Nantucket and wrote this great book, which, okay, here we go, everybody, 3, 2, 1. We've got Nantucket's North Shore. Yeah, Fran's one of Fran's great history books, which you can buy at Michigan's Book Corner. And we're going to make sure that they have copies there. And I wondered, what was the experience of researching this area of the island that was so meaningful to you as somebody who grew up here and was a Sheffield descendant? Yeah.
Well, first, I really am so grateful to Sarah Noelle for rescuing my triple great grandparents' house, because for so many years we watched it descend into disrepair, and hearts were always in our mouths that one day it would either collapse or burn down. And it just is really meaningful to me to know that it will be safe for another couple of hundred years. When I approached Spinner about doing this book, I'd previously done a history of Nantucket's working people called The Other Islanders, people who pulled Nantucket's oars. So I went back to the publisher and I said that I wanted to do this one. And his first question to me was, why one neighborhood and not the whole island? And I said, well, because I know this neighborhood so very well in a way I don't know other parts of Nantucket, even though, yeah, I'm from here, but this is where I grew up. But there was another thing, and that was scattered through the book. There are these little recipes. And the way that this concept started was that when I inherited my house from my aunt, I inherited a lot of things with it, and one was a collection of old Nantucket recipes. And so I just began to think about where we live and what the foodways were of the people who have lived here. And I have to hand it to Joe Thomas at Spinner that he bought the concept. And it did take quite a while to come into being, because it was a couple of decades that I had the idea before it actually became a book. I enjoyed talking with other people who'd grown up here.
Yeah.
Particularly Bill Hoadley, who was just enough older than me that we didn't really overlap in our childhood. But there are things that I remember that I would check with Bill and say, is this right? And he would reinforce it, like the sign at the bottom of the hill, please walk your horses up this hill. That was the name he gave to his memoir. And I remembered that sign too, and then we began to discuss, when was the last time we saw that sign? When did it go away? And concluded that they probably took it down when Mr. Wire, who owned the livery stable across the street from my house, stopped keeping horses there. This is a really absolutely living neighborhood for me. And the Sheffields, of course, one set of triple great grandparents, and another set was Captain Hezekiah Pinkham and his family. They bought the house at 12 Cliff Road in 1810. And so our family lived in that for generation after generation. And now I only live a half a block away. So yeah, this is just much more personal to me than other neighborhoods of the town of Nantucket that I know and appreciate, but don't know that well.
Oh, great. Yeah, thank you. A question for Colin and Nathaniel, and that's, how did you get into it? How did you get interested in preservation work? And how did you decide that this is what you wanted to spend your time doing on Nantucket?
Colin?
I started out working with Penn Austin, along with a few other people here on island who'd been doing traditional trade work for quite some time. So that's kind of how I got involved with it, is started to apprentice from those people, learn the trades. So most of my experience is all on job, learned on job training.
I had come up through the trades as well and just always found myself working on antique houses and was enamored by them. Met a group of individuals who sort of took me under their wing. I worked and learned as much as I could on site and through as much literature as I could get my hands on. But then I ended up getting formalized training at the North Bennett Street School about 5 years ago, and moved on from there.
Great. Excellent. Abby, I have a question for you.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. It's so weird to Abby to see you on a screen and not see the
My
stage
usual backdrop.
of your HTC, your room you're in at 27 Lily Street. I will tell you, every tour we've given, when we say that's, Abby and she's on the HDC, and they all say, oh, they all know the paneling. But I know that you were on the Wisconsin Advisory Board, you live in a historic home, you renovated, you restored a home, you sit on the HDC now. What is it like being on that side of the table, on the HDC side of the table? And what I guess I would say is what advice might you have for somebody who's going before the HDC? What would you like to see from applicants?
Oh, gosh. It's horrible. I don't want to get started on what's happening to the island.
Yeah.
Everybody knows. But I think I tend to use the word generic a lot. And what this group has here is a real love of craftsmanship and preservation. And not everybody building a house or designing a house has that. It could be as bad as a spec house. So there's no personality put into the design. It's being designed, it could be cookie cutter. So I would say to applicants, just first of all, everybody as a prerequisite to living on Nantucket should have to live in an Underhill cottage. See how small a wonderful house can be. You don't need a McMansion. You don't need, 6,500 square feet of space, so I would just like to see a little more personality put into the design. We do have a lot of good architects on this island, thank God. But then, every once in a while somebody will. But so we're lucky we do have that. So I will end on a positive note that we do have some good architects that do understand the different vernaculars and do have a good sense of scale and those sorts of things.
And of course, I'm sure everyone on this call knows this is our members and supporters. But the Nantucket Preservation Trust is here to help you if you are applying to the HDC and you need some historical information to present. I think that always helps the commissioners make the best decision when they have all the historical information in front of them. And we are always happy to do that so that they can do their jobs even better. I know that it's an amazing amount of work. I think you're getting like 100 applications a week these days. So we really appreciate you taking this extra hour of your day to Zoom with us. Let's see. I did have a question for Fran, which is, it's called Gull Island. Where does that island part come from?
Good question.
Well, until we're told Love Paddock let the lily pond out, that really was an island. The house on Gull Island, the first part of that big house was built in 1739. And the story goes that Love Paddock had let the lily pond out about a decade earlier. But in the 1600s and the beginning of the 1700s, there was enough water there that they ran several different mills on incoming and outgoing water from that pond. And the mills were right at the intersection of Chester Center, Gull Island Lane. So it was different, and you can see the outlines of the pond. You can see that once it was. And it does try to fill up again, like the dip between Westchester Street and Gull Island, filled up with water and was like that for about 2.5, 3 years before they got the drain unplugged. So at a certain point, the town built drains, I mean, around the beginning of the 20th century to keep it from filling up again. And those drains have collapsed and gotten plugged, and they're not as effective as they were. And I think the land bank has some plans for re-engineering that. We'll see what they do. But, you know, even at the first decades of the 20th century, there's a lot more water down towards the other end of Lily Street, enough that it was a place where people went ice skating. There's hardly any water there now at all.
Wow. I think that's really,
it's gradually getting grown in and dried up, which is a natural process after all.
sure. It's, you know, that was one of the other things I think we were all noticing as we were walking around and looking at old photos, is just how much the landscape has changed since the area was deforested when so many of these structures and houses were built. And then B, just how houses adapt and change over time, and things are added and details are removed and additions go up. And so it's all very interesting.
Mary, I had a thing about, I wanted to ask Francis if there was any truth in this, but you know, the Bennetts on Lily Street, there are, let's see, they must be about
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
You know, the Bennetts. So he told me, I was just passing by one day and I was asking him about, you know, Gull Island, and he said that like in the Civil War or something, that a you know, a soldier or a general or something had retreated to Gull Island, and the Indians had sort of kept him up there because there was water around it, and he stayed in that house. Now, I don't know if any of that is true, but it's
that just can't be true. But in the late 1600s, Spain and England were at war, and according to Obed Macy, writing in 1835, the English settlers on the island used Gull Island as a place to put their valuables. So in case the Spaniards were to invade Nantucket, their valuables would be on an island in the middle of the water with a moat around it. That all seems so unlikely to us now. But you know, there weren't any Indians on Nantucket to threaten people living on Gull Island. The time just doesn't match up right.
Wow. Can't believe everything that you hear, I guess, unfortunately. Now, Sarah, I know, again, we had a question from a woman who was on a tour earlier, which is that you mentioned that you were looking for old glass all over the island. Where do you find it? You don't have to give away all of your sources, but.
So there's a Nantucket Facebook marketplace, consignments, whatever it is. And so invariably people will post that they have old windows. And so I will race out to see if the windows are old enough, because there's a difference in glass. So I'll grab any old window that I can find. I actually was able to get the windows out of 13 Union Street before they were thrown away. And so I took those, and the windows themselves are newer by probably 10 or so years. However, the glass, I was able to take that out and save, and it's the same size or slightly larger. I have a glass cutting table, so I can cut it down to size. I've found old storm windows with wavy glass. I've cut that down. For the most part, I probably was able to save maybe 80% of the panes of glass that were original to the house, or at least original to the sash when I took over the house. Not all of them were old, and so I've sort of, discarded them. I've kind of graded the glass. The thinner the glass, the older it was, the wavier it was. That'll go up back on the front of the house. I've also tried to maintain the glass from the front facade in the places where they were, so that you're going to see the house itself will read pretty original from the standpoint of the original windows and, whatever. The sash themselves, actually, once the paint came off, were in very good condition because of the old growth wood. The trim and the fenestration, because of the lack of weather stripping and flashing and stuff like that, some of them were more deteriorated than others, and so there's been repairs that will need to be done to the frame around it. But everything will look the way that it was when I found it. We did find that there are certain profiles that were different around the different planes of the house, which was somewhat interesting. And so we were sort of able to look and go, okay, well, this window was put in at a later date in this room, kind of to match the one, but it doesn't really match. And so it was interesting to see over time how the house evolved, and you would look at it and go, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense that it all matches. But when you actually really look at it, you realize that it was over different campaigns during the house in terms of when things were updated or built or added onto. So that's been pretty interesting. And then, anyone that's getting rid of old windows, I literally will sort of track them down and say, please give me your old windows and I will keep them.
So that's a call out there for all of you.
Definitely.
If you've got old windows,
great. I've got my eye on it.
Yeah, while I was there, I remember, just like in one day, you got some old nails, you got a tub.
I know.
A lot of great stuff is going to be down there in that house.
When we
The
were-
participants, if they have any questions too, we're going to be wrapping up soon. So it's last chance to get your questions in the chats. Yes, Fran?
Oh, I was going to say that in the 90s, when we were restoring the African Meeting House, we had the same issue. We wanted to replace those panes in the windows in the African Meeting House that had been broken. And we asked also for people who had old windows, and it was very successful. If you visit the African Meeting House and you see the light streaming in through those windows and leaving wavy patterns on the wall, it's very gratifying.
It's a lot of excellent work. Well, we're just so happy. We're just so pleased and thankful to all of you for all of the work that you've done and that you're doing, and for letting us into your homes and walking past your homes. And I know this year again, another plenty of folks said, gee, did you, I don't know, when we were planning this, we had to plan back in the winter time when things were uncertain, and then things got a little more certain, and now they're uncertain again. So I'm glad that we were able to gather here virtually, and I know that we'll be back together again next year. And again, folks, if you haven't had a chance to watch some of these videos, you get to go into these houses, and I know that you're really, you must have a lot of questions. If you're listening to us talk about Sarah's house and you haven't actually seen the video, it would be really worth your time, and all the other films as well. So let's see. Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone again, to thank Rita and Gussie and Barbara, Michelle, all of the homeowners, Colin and Nathaniel, for your time. Abby, my heart goes out to you for all the time that you devote to the HDC, and Fran, for all of your research. It's really, informed so much of our work. And it's just really nice to get to chat with people and to hear more about the neighborhood. And I think we'll all be walking around the Lily Pond a little more now that they know they know the way around.
That's right.
Thanks everybody for your time. And again, those of you watching at home, if you haven't had a chance, to check out our auction, because again, the Fed is one of our largest fundraisers. It's our only fundraiser, really. I'm going to put that auction link in the chat again. We're on our way, folks. But anyway, well, I appreciate all of your time and the support of our business sponsors, Pure Insurance, Nantucket Insurance, Susan Zises Green, Interior Design, and Silvercrest Asset Management, and all of our leadership supporters and sponsors and everyone here on this call. So thank you again so much. We'll
Thank you.
move off into the night. Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
great night, everybody.